In elementary school, we had a regular substitute named Dr. Griffith, who would often cover for the physical education teacher. I knew next to nothing about Dr. Griffith, but he had the cadence and bearing of a Marine, and likewise held the fourth graders in his gym to strict, exacting standards. Your school district does not allow us to play the sport called dodgeball, he would explain. Instead, we will be playing a game of my own devising called spherical projectile evasion. Unsurprisingly, the rules of spherical projectile evasion were identical to dodgeball. Once Dr. Griffith asked the class an open-ended question to which I raised my hand. He called on me by pointing and saying, "Yes, you, in the doo-doo brown shirt." I remember the rest of the class laughing at me, and I felt a stinging sense of betrayal. I liked my brown shirt. Was it now unfashionable? Would I have to change? What I didn't know then was that wearing the doo-doo brown shirt was only my first mistake. Becoming a substitute teacher years later was the second. At the end of the interview for the substituting job with Boston Public Schools, the substitute coordinator, having reviewed my background check and resume, said, "I don't see any reason not to hire you, unless..." I looked at her blankly. Was she trying to get me to volunteer a way in which I was unqualified? Even though I could think of many, I wasn't going to get tripped up at the finish line. I was so close to my dream job of making $140 a day to babysit school children. I could almost smell the teacher's lounge. My first day of subbing involved staring at a half-empty room of high schoolers at one of Boston's vocational schools. I was partnered with a semi-retired engineer who taught the actual technical machining aspects of the class. He had the thickest working-class Boston accent I had ever heard, and held some very interesting opinions concerning the integration busing from the 60s to match it. I quickly learned that teachers have a grim, fatalistic outlook on the world and their mission as educators. Very soon I found myself a cog in a vast machine designed to fit square children into round holes. Those that could be molded were accepted. For those that could not, it was my job to make their daily lives hell. Just as well because, for their part, the kids never gave me a moment of peace. One morning at a middle school I frequented, I had just assigned yet another packet of busy work when one of the girls in the class came up to me. She surveyed me for a moment as if looking for weakness, and then asked, "Do you have a girlfriend?" To which I responded, "No." "Are you married?" "No." "So you don't have anybody?" "No." "Oh, so you were lonely then," she said, emphasis on the lonely. At that, she turned around and went back to her seat. I felt like somebody had punched me in the gut. At one point, I was subbing a dance class, which is somewhat outside of my wheelhouse. I'm built more like a ballroom than a ballerina. Regardless, as I started to explain that we would be watching the seminal dance classic Happy Feet, one of the students in the class raised their hand and said, "You don't look like a dancer." "Well, I'm not," I began to say, but the student continued, "You look like a gamer." Of all the things said to me, the taunts, jeers, and juvenile derision, this one hurt the most. This small baby child saw through me and into me, and sussed out the very nature of my soul and found me wanting. It was devastating. Oh, you all right? You good? But not as devastating as the time a despairing boy asked me, "What's the point of school or anything if we all die anyway?" Well, I took a deep breath and stared into space for a moment. They didn't prepare me for these kinds of existential questions in the 3-day training course I took. So I flagged down the teacher from next door for help. Almost done. One day, I was walking back to the tee from school with a cheerful boy from my class. He was heading to his grandmother's house and gave me a hug on parting. Several months later, I saw him again, sitting dejected at his desk, and asked him how he was doing. He looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes and said his grandmother had died a few weeks ago. That was but one small reminder that in teaching, as in life, we only get to learn about the smallest snapshots of people's lives. And if we're lucky, they get to learn about ours in return. Thank you.